She ironed his shirt that morning. She kissed him goodbye at the door. She had no idea that by midnight she would be sitting in her car in the rain with $200 to her name and a suitcase full of broken promises. For 8 years, Claire Bennett gave everything to a man the whole town called perfect. She gave up her art career. She gave up New York. She gave up herself. And what did she get in return? A $14,000 Tiffany necklace on another woman's neck, bought with money stolen from Claire's dead father. But here is what Grant Bennett did not know when he threw his wife away like yesterday's trash. He did not know that the quiet woman who burned casseroles and smiled through her pain was about to become the most dangerous thing in his world, a woman with nothing left to lose. She lost her husband. She lost her home. She lost her job. She lost her family. She was betrayed by the people she trusted most. And just when she thought she had finally clawed her way back to safety, he found a way to destroy her again. This is not a love story. This is a survival story. And by the end, you will understand why the wife he threw away became the woman he feared most. The lesson: this story carries one truth that every woman and every man needs to hear. The most dangerous lie is not the one someone tells you. It is the one you tell yourself, that you are not strong enough to survive. You are. You always were. No matter how far you fall, your comeback can be greater than your setback, but only if you refuse to stay down. The meaning: this is a story about betrayal, but it is really about something much bigger. It is about what happens when a woman stops waiting to be rescued and starts rescuing herself. It is about the power of art, the strength of a mother's love, and the quiet courage it takes to rebuild your life when someone has burned it to the ground. If you have ever been underestimated, overlooked, or thrown away, this story is for you. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something real, do me a small favor. Hit that like button right now. It costs you nothing, but it helps this story reach another woman out there who needs to hear it tonight. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever been underestimated by someone who later regretted it? I read every single comment, and your story matters just as much as Claire's. And if you have not subscribed yet, join this family. We tell stories here that stay with you long after the video ends. Hit subscribe and the bell so you never miss one. Now, let us begin.
She ironed his shirt that morning. The pale blue one, the one he always said made his eyes look sharper in meetings. Claire Bennett stood in the laundry room of their craftsman-style home in Charlotte, North Carolina, pressing the collar with careful precision, the steam rising like a whispered prayer. She had done this every Monday for 8 years. 8 years of pressed shirts and packed lunches and quiet devotion. 8 years of believing that love was not a grand performance, but a series of small, steady acts. And Claire was nothing if not steady. Outside, the dogwood trees were blooming along their quiet street in the Myers Park neighborhood, their white petals catching the early April light like confetti frozen in midair. It was the kind of morning that made you believe the world was gentle, the kind of morning that lied to you. Claire hung the shirt on the hook behind the bedroom door and glanced at herself in the hallway mirror. 34 years old, brown hair pulled into a loose ponytail. No makeup yet, just the faint lines around her eyes that she had earned from years of smiling at second graders who brought her drawings of lopsided cats and rainbow houses. She was an art teacher at Eastwood Elementary, and she loved it with the kind of love that does not need to announce itself. She heard Grant coming down the stairs. Grant Bennett, 38, her husband, tall, broad-shouldered, with a jaw that could have been carved from the granite of the Blue Ridge Mountains. He had the kind of confidence that filled a room the way cologne fills an elevator. Impossible to ignore, sometimes overwhelming, but undeniably present. Grant was a real estate developer, a successful one, or so everyone believed. He had built Bennett Property Group from a one-man operation working out of their guest bedroom into a company with an office downtown, a staff of 12, and a portfolio of luxury properties that stretched from Charlotte to Asheville. People in town called them the Golden Couple, Claire and Grant Bennett, the art teacher and the deal maker, the woman who created beauty and the man who sold it. Grant walked into the kitchen, adjusting his cufflinks, and Claire handed him a cup of coffee. Black, 2 sugars. She knew his rhythms the way a musician knows a song, without thinking, without effort. "Your shirt is on the door," she said. "Thanks, babe." He kissed her forehead. Quick, automatic. The way you tap a button you have pressed 1,000 times before. Claire turned back to the stove, where she was attempting, once again, to make a breakfast casserole. The recipe had come from a Southern cooking blog that promised it was foolproof. Claire had proven that promise wrong 3 times already. She pulled the dish from the oven and stared at it. The edges were black. The center was still somehow liquid. It looked like a science experiment that had gone terribly wrong. "Grant," she said, holding up the dish, "I think I created a new element." He glanced over and laughed. That easy, charming laugh that had made her fall in love with him at a 4th of July barbecue 9 years ago. "Is that supposed to be food?" "It was supposed to be a sausage and egg bake. I think it is now a biohazard." "Well," he said, grabbing his briefcase, "at least the smoke alarm still works." She laughed too. And in that moment, standing in her kitchen with burned food and a husband who made her smile, Claire Bennett believed she was happy. She believed her life was solid. She believed the ground beneath her feet was firm. She had no idea that by tonight she would be sleeping in her car with nothing but a suitcase and a shattered heart. Grant left at 7:45. Claire cleaned the kitchen, scraped the failed casserole into the trash, and got ready for school. She put on her favorite denim jacket, the one with the tiny paint stain on the sleeve that she never bothered to remove because it reminded her of who she was, an artist, a teacher, a woman who believed in color and possibility. But as she reached for her keys on the entryway table, her hand brushed against Grant's winter coat, the one he had worn last week when the temperature dropped unexpectedly. Something crinkled in the pocket. She pulled it out, a receipt. From Tiffany & Company, dated 3 weeks ago, $14,000, for a necklace. Claire stared at the receipt. She turned it over, as if the back might offer some explanation, some context that would make this make sense. Their anniversary was in June. Her birthday was in September. There was no occasion that would explain a $14,000 necklace. But Claire Bennett was a woman who believed in the best version of every story. So she folded the receipt, put it back in the pocket, and told herself it was a surprise. Maybe he was planning something special. Maybe she would find that necklace under her pillow one evening, and she would cry, and he would hold her, and she would feel foolish for ever doubting him. That was the first lie she told herself that day. It would not be the last. She drove to school with the windows down, letting the spring air wash over her. She taught her morning classes with her usual warmth. She helped a 7-year-old named Lily mix blue and yellow to discover green for the first time, and the look of wonder on that child's face was worth more than any necklace from any store in the world. But the receipt lingered in the back of her mind, like a splinter she could not reach. That evening, Grant came home late, 9:15. He said he had been showing a property to an out-of-town client. He said the deal was complicated. He said all the right words in all the right order. But when he leaned in to kiss her, Claire smelled something. A perfume. Rich, heavy, floral. Not hers. Claire wore light vanilla from a small bottle she bought at the farmer's market. This was something expensive, something deliberate. She said nothing, She smiled. She served dinner, leftover chicken from her mother's recipe, the one thing she could actually cook well. They ate in their usual comfortable silence, the television murmuring in the background, and Claire told herself the second lie of the day. He is a good man. He would never hurt me. I am safe. Here is something every woman needs to hear, and every man, too, for that matter. When your gut whispers that something is wrong, listen. Your instincts are not paranoid. They are not dramatic. They are the accumulated wisdom of every experience you have ever had working overtime to protect you. Claire's instinct was screaming that night, sending up flares like a distress signal from a sinking ship. But she chose comfort over truth. She chose the version of her life that felt safe over the version that was real. And that decision cost her everything. 5 days later, on a Tuesday that had started like any other Tuesday, Claire decided to surprise Grant at his office. She left school during her lunch break, stopped at Moretti's Deli on East Boulevard, and picked up his favorite, a steak and provolone sub with hot peppers and extra oil. She even grabbed a bag of those sea salt chips he liked and 2 bottles of sweet tea. She drove downtown with the windows down, feeling generous and loving and a little bit proud of herself for being the kind of wife who still brought her husband lunch after 8 years. She parked in the garage beneath his building, took the elevator to the 6th floor, and walked through the glass doors of Bennett Property Group with a smile on her face and a paper bag in her hands. The receptionist, a young woman named Taylor, looked up with an expression that Claire would later recognize as panic disguised as politeness. "Mrs. Bennett, hi. Mr. Bennett is in his office, but he might be in a meeting." "That is okay," Claire said cheerfully. "I will just pop in for a second." She walked down the hallway. She could see his office through the glass walls. The door was slightly open, and through that gap, Claire Bennett saw the truth that her instincts had been trying to tell her for weeks. Grant was standing by his desk, and pressed against him, her arms around his neck, her lips on his, was a woman Claire had never seen before. She was tall, maybe 5'9", with dark hair that fell in perfect waves past her shoulders. She wore a fitted black dress and heels that probably cost more than Claire's entire wardrobe. And around her neck, catching the fluorescent office light like a tiny constellation, was a diamond necklace. $14,000. Tiffany and Company. The paper bag slipped from Claire's hands. It hit the floor with a soft thud, and the sound was enough. Grant turned, the woman turned, and for a moment the three of them stood in a triangle of silence that contained the entire wreckage of Claire's life. Grant's face cycled through expressions like a slot machine: surprise, irritation, and then, worst of all, a cold, calculated calm. He straightened his tie. He took one step back from the woman, and he spoke. "Claire, let us not make a scene. We both know this marriage has been over for a long time." Claire could not speak. Her mouth opened, but no words came. She felt like someone had reached inside her chest and removed something essential, some load-bearing wall that had been holding up the entire structure of her life. The woman smiled, not with warmth, not with sympathy, but with the satisfied expression of someone who has won a game that Claire did not even know was being played. "He was never really yours, sweetheart," the woman said. Her voice was smooth and cold, like marble. "You were just keeping the seat warm." Claire would later learn that the woman's name was Victoria Ashford, 29 years old, a luxury real estate agent from Atlanta who had moved to Charlotte 8 months ago. Beautiful in the way that expensive things are beautiful, polished, precise, and completely without warmth. But in that moment, Claire did not know her name. She only knew that this woman was wearing her husband's secret on her neck, and that her husband was looking at her, Claire, the woman who had ironed his shirts and burned his casseroles and loved him without condition for 8 years, as if she were a stranger who had wandered into the wrong office. Claire picked up the paper bag. Her hands were shaking so badly that the chips fell out and scattered across the floor. She turned and walked back down the hallway. Taylor, the receptionist, would not look at her. Through the glass walls, Claire could feel every employee's eyes on her back, watching the wife discover what they had probably known for months. She made it to her car before the tears came. They came hard and fast, the kind of crying that bends you over the steering wheel and makes you forget how to breathe. She cried until her ribs hurt. She cried until the sweet tea went warm in the bag beside her. And then she drove home. Because where else do you go when your world ends? You go home. You go to the place that feels safe, even when safety has become an illusion. But home was no longer safe either. When Grant came back that evening, he did not come with apologies. He did not come with explanations or remorse, or even the basic human decency of shame. He came with a manila envelope. "I filed for divorce 3 weeks ago," he said, setting the envelope on the kitchen counter as casually as if it were a takeout menu. "My attorney has the details. I think it is best if you find somewhere else to stay." Claire stared at the envelope. 3 weeks ago. He had filed 3 weeks ago, and for 21 days he had kissed her forehead every morning, eaten her dinners every night, slept beside her in their bed, all while knowing he had already ended their marriage on paper. "3 weeks," she whispered. "You filed 3 weeks ago, and you did not tell me." I did not want to disrupt things until the timing was right. "The timing?" She laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that sounds like something breaking. "You mean until I walked in on you with her?" Grant shrugged. Actually shrugged, as if 8 years of marriage were an inconvenience he was finally shaking off. "You have 48 hours to get your things." "My things. Grant, this is my house too." "Actually, it is not. The deed is in my name. My attorney confirmed it. You have 48 hours, Claire. I am trying to be fair." Fair. He used the word fair while standing in the kitchen she had painted sage green on a Sunday afternoon, while standing on the hardwood floors she had refinished by hand, while surrounded by the home she had turned from an empty house into a living, breathing place full of warmth and memory. Claire called Megan Holloway that night. Megan was her best friend, had been since college, at UNC Chapel Hill. She was also a divorce attorney, and she was the kind of woman who could make a courtroom tremble with a single raised eyebrow. Megan arrived at the house in 20 minutes, still wearing her pajama pants under her coat because she had not bothered to change. "Let me see the papers," Megan said, her voice tight with controlled fury. Claire handed over the envelope. Megan read through the documents at the kitchen table, her expression darkening with every page. "Claire," Megan said slowly, "he has frozen your joint accounts, all of them, the checking, the savings, the money market. According to these filings, he is claiming the house, both vehicles, and the full value of Bennett Property Group as separate property." "What does that mean?" "It means he is trying to leave you with nothing." Claire opened her banking app on her phone. Her personal checking account, the small one she kept for her own purchases, showed a balance of $212.37. $212. That was the sum total of her financial existence after 8 years of marriage to a man who drove a Mercedes and wore watches that cost more than her annual salary. That night, after Grant went upstairs without another word, Claire packed a single suitcase. She moved through the house like a ghost, touching things she would never touch again. The ceramic bowl she had made in a pottery class, the photo on the mantel from their honeymoon in Savannah, the reading nook by the bay window where she had spent 1,000 quiet evenings with a book and a cup of chamomile tea. She loaded her suitcase into her old Honda Civic, the one Grant had always said she should replace, but that she kept, because it had been her first car, bought with her own money, earned from her own work. She sat in the driveway with the engine running. Inside the house, the lights went off one by one. First the kitchen, then the living room, then the bedroom, her bedroom, their bedroom, the room where she had slept beside a man who had been planning her destruction for weeks. Claire gripped the steering wheel and whispered into the darkness, "How did I not see this coming?" The dogwood petals drifted across her windshield like small white surrenders, and Claire Bennett drove away from the only life she had ever known. Claire's mother, Diane Porter, lived in a small two-bedroom apartment above Henderson's hardware store on a quiet street in the Belmont neighborhood. The building was old, the stairs creaked, and the hot water took forever to arrive. But the rent was reasonable, and the landlord, old Mr. Henderson himself, had always been kind. Diane was 61 years old, a retired nurse who had spent 30 years working the night shift at Carolina's Medical Center. She had raised Claire alone after Claire's father, David Porter, died of a heart attack when Claire was 9. Diane was the kind of Southern woman who believed in three things: God, good manners, and the absolute certainty that no problem on earth could not be improved by a home-cooked meal. When Claire appeared at her door at 11:30 at night, mascara streaked down her face, dragging a suitcase behind her like a soldier. Retreating from a battle she never asked to fight, Diane did not ask questions. She opened the door, pulled her daughter inside, and held her. They stood in the narrow hallway for a long time, Claire's shoulders shaking, Diane's hand steady on her back. Finally, Diane said, "Come sit down. I will make you something to eat. Mom, I cannot eat right now. You can and you will. Grief is heavy work. You need fuel." Diane heated up her famous chicken pot pie, the one with the golden crust and the creamy filling that tasted like childhood and safety and everything Claire had just lost. She set the plate in front of Claire at the small kitchen table and sat across from her. "Eat," Diane said. "No man is worth starving over." She paused, then added, "Now if he had been a good cook, that would be a real loss." Claire laughed. It came out broken and wet, more sob than sound. But it was a laugh, and it was the first one since Tuesday, and Diane counted it as a victory. Claire moved into her old bedroom. It was exactly as she had left it when she went off to college at 18. The walls were still the lavender she had chosen in high school. Her old easel stood in the corner, dusty but upright, like a loyal friend who had been waiting for her return. Boxes of art supplies lined the closet shelf. Colored pencils and charcoal sticks and tubes of oil paint that had probably gone hard years ago. She lay in her childhood bed that first night, staring at the ceiling where she had once taped glow-in-the-dark stars that had long since fallen, and she tried to make sense of what had happened. 8 years of marriage, 8 years of love, or what she had believed was love. And it had ended not with a conversation, not with tears and honesty and the painful but respectful acknowledgement that two people had grown apart, but with a manila envelope and a 48-hour eviction from her own life. The next morning, Megan came over with coffee and a legal pad. She sat at Diane's kitchen table and got to work. "Here's where we stand," Megan said, her pen moving in sharp, decisive strokes. Grant's filing claims that nearly all marital assets are his separate property. He is arguing that the house was purchased with funds from his business, which he claims predates the marriage. He is declaring total assets of roughly $800,000. "Is that accurate?" Claire asked. Megan looked at her with an expression that was equal parts sympathy and fury. "Claire, I have been watching Grant Bennett operate for 8 years. That man's real estate portfolio is worth at least $4 million, probably more. He is hiding assets. I would bet my license on it. How do we prove that? We dig, and we dig fast, before he has time to bury everything deeper. Claire spent the next 2 weeks becoming a detective in her own life. She went through every box, every file, every scrap of paper she had kept from their marriage. Bank statements, tax returns, property records, closing documents from deals Grant had mentioned over dinner. She found most of it in the storage unit they had rented on South Boulevard, the one Grant had apparently forgotten about because he had not bothered to clean it out, and buried in a box labeled 2019 tax documents. Claire found something that made her hands go still. A folder. Inside were account statements from a bank in the Cayman Islands. 3 accounts, all in Grant's name, holding a combined total of $3.2 million. Claire called Megan immediately. "I found it," she said, her voice trembling. "He has offshore accounts. 3 of them, over $3 million. Megan was silent for a moment. Then she said, "Claire, this changes everything. Do not touch those documents. Do not tell anyone you have them. I am filing an emergency motion first thing Monday morning." The motion was filed. The judge reviewed the evidence. Within 72 hours, Grant's hidden accounts were frozen, and a forensic accountant was appointed to review the full scope of his financial holdings. Claire felt something she had not felt in weeks. Hope. Fragile, tentative hope, like the first green shoot pushing through frozen ground. "I am going to be okay," she told Megan that evening, sitting on the porch of Diane's apartment building, watching the sun set over the Charlotte skyline. "It is going to work out." "You are going to be more than okay," Megan said. "You are going to get what you deserve." And for a moment, Claire believed it. She believed that the worst was behind her, that justice would prevail, that the system would protect her. She was wrong. 4 days later, Claire's phone rang at 7 in the morning. It was the principal of Eastwood Elementary, Dr. Karen Mitchell. "Claire, I need you to come in this morning, before classes start." "Of course. Is everything all right?" There was a pause. The kind of pause that contains an entire catastrophe. "Just come in, Claire." When Claire arrived, she was directed not to her classroom, but to the administrative conference room, where Dr. Mitchell sat beside the school district's human resources director and a woman Claire did not recognize. "Claire," Dr. Mitchell began, and her voice had the careful, rehearsed quality of someone delivering a speech she did not want to give. "We have received a formal complaint regarding your fitness to teach." "My fitness to teach? I do not understand." The HR director slid a document across the table. It was a letter on medical letterhead from a Dr. William Reinhardt, a psychiatrist affiliated with Mercy General Hospital. The letter stated that Claire Bennett exhibited signs of severe emotional instability, erratic behavior, and potential risk to the safety of minor children in her care. Claire read the letter 3 times. Her vision blurred. Her hands gripped the edge of the table. "I have never seen this doctor in my life," she said. "I have never been a patient of this man. This letter is a lie." "We understand this is difficult," the HR director said in a tone that suggested she did not understand at all. "But given the severity of the allegations, we are placing you on indefinite administrative leave, pending a full investigation." "You cannot do this. I have been teaching here for 6 years. My evaluations are perfect. My students love me. You know me." Dr. Mitchell looked away. She could not meet Claire's eyes. And in that moment, Claire understood that this was not about truth. This was about power. She later learned through Megan's investigation that Dr. William Reinhardt was a personal friend of Gerald Ashford, Victoria's father, who sat on the board of Mercy General Hospital. The letter was entirely fabricated. Grant had orchestrated the complaint through Victoria's family connections. He had taken her husband. He had taken her home. He had taken her money. And now he had taken her job, the one thing she had left, the one place where she still mattered, where children looked at her and saw someone worthy of trust. Claire sat in her car in the school parking lot for an hour after the meeting. She did not cry. She was past crying. She felt hollow, scooped out, like a pumpkin the day after Halloween, still shaped like something, but empty inside. She drove to Diane's apartment. She walked inside. She sat on the couch. Diane looked at her face and knew immediately. What did he do now? Diane asked. He got me fired, Mom. He got me fired from my own job. Diane was quiet for a long moment. Then she walked to the kitchen, put the kettle on, and said, Baby, you are not broken. You are just bent. And bent, things can straighten out. If there is one kind of pain that cuts deeper than the betrayal of a spouse, it is the betrayal of family. A husband can become a stranger, and though it breaks your heart, there is a logic to it, a grim acceptance that people change and promises fail. But family is supposed to be the bedrock. Family is supposed to be the thing that holds when everything else gives way. Claire had always been close with her cousin, Rebecca Porter. They were the same generation, only 4 years apart, and they had grown up more like sisters than cousins. Rebecca's mother, Diane's younger sister, had passed away when Rebecca was 19, and Diane had taken Rebecca under her wing, inviting her to every holiday dinner, every birthday, every Sunday afternoon, gathering on the porch. Rebecca was 30 years old, pretty in a restless kind of way, always chasing something, always convinced that the next job, the next boyfriend, the next city would be the one that finally made her feel like she had arrived. She had bounced through half a dozen careers and twice as many apartments, and Claire had always been the one to help her, lending money, offering her couch, writing recommendation letters. So when Megan called Claire on a Thursday morning, with a voice that was tight with barely controlled rage, Claire was not prepared for what came next. Claire, I need you to sit down. I am sitting. I found out how Grant's attorney has been one step ahead of us on every motion. Someone has been feeding them information about our legal strategy. Who? Rebecca. The name landed like a stone dropped into still water. Claire felt the impact spread through her entire body. That is not possible, Claire said. Rebecca would never do that. She has been working as Victoria Ashford's personal assistant for the past 6 months. She was hired 2 months before you found out about the affair. Victoria has been using her to monitor everything, your emotional state, your conversations with Megan, your legal plans, everything. Claire confronted Rebecca that afternoon. They met in the parking lot of a Starbucks off Providence Road because Claire could not bear to have this conversation in Diane's apartment, in the home where they had shared at Thanksgivings and Christmas mornings and lazy summer afternoons. Rebecca did not deny it. She stood beside her car with her arms crossed and her chin lifted in an expression that was half defiance, half shame. Victoria offered me a job, Rebecca said. A real job, Claire. Executive assistant, $65,000 a year, plus benefits. Do you know how much I was making at that temp agency? $22,000. I was drowning. So you sold me out. I did what I had to do. You fed them my legal strategy. You told them about the offshore accounts. You gave them everything. Rebecca's jaw tightened. Victoria offered me a life, a real life, with a salary and health insurance and a future. I am sorry, Claire, but loyalty does not pay my rent. Claire stared at her cousin, this girl she had taught to ride a bike. This girl whose tears she had dried after her mother's funeral. This girl who had sat in Diane's kitchen eating pot pie and laughing at old family stories just last Thanksgiving. Does Aunt Diane know? Rebecca asked. And for the first time, A flicker of real fear crossed her face. "She will," Claire said. And she turned and walked away. Diane's reaction was exactly what you would expect from a 61-year-old Southern woman who had spent her life holding her family together with love and willpower and an iron sense of right and wrong. She called Rebecca that evening. "Your grandmother would have taken a switch to you," Diane said into the phone, her voice steady and cold. "You broke bread in my house while you were stabbing my daughter in the back. Do not ever call this number again." She hung up. Then she went to the kitchen and started making cornbread, because that was how Diane Porter processed her grief, by feeding people. But the damage was done. Grant's attorneys, armed with the intelligence Rebecca had provided, had anticipated every legal move Megan made. The forensic accountant's investigation was slowed by procedural challenges that someone on the inside had clearly prepared for. The case that had seemed so strong a week ago was now mired in delays and countermotions. And then the catastrophes came. Not one at a time, which might have been manageable, but in a rapid, merciless sequence that seemed designed by fate itself to test the absolute limits of what one woman could endure. The first catastrophe arrived on a Monday morning. Claire's Honda Civic, the faithful little car that had carried her through college and her 20s, and now through the worst crisis of her life, died in the middle of the intersection at East Boulevard and Dilworth Road. The transmission, which had been making concerning noises for months, finally gave out completely. The repair estimate was $3,800. Claire had $412 to her name. She stood on the sidewalk while the tow truck loaded her car, and she did not cry. She was learning that there are levels of loss beyond tears, places where the pain is so constant that it becomes a kind of weather, something you walk through rather than something you feel. The second catastrophe arrived 3 days later. Claire was scrolling through her phone when she saw the headline in the Charlotte Observer's Society section. Real estate developer Grant Bennett and Atlanta beauty Victoria Ashford announce engagement at Magnolia Gala. There were photos, Grant in a tuxedo, smiling his golden smile. Victoria in a white gown, the Tiffany necklace at her throat. Her hand extended to display a ring that could have paid Claire's rent for a year. The Magnolia Gala. Claire had helped organize that event for the past 3 years, coordinating the silent auction, arranging the centerpieces, making sure the name cards were in the right places. And now she had been replaced there too, erased from a world she had helped build. The third catastrophe was the cruelest because it threatened not just Claire, but the one person she could not bear to see hurt. A letter arrived at Diane's apartment from the building's owner, a property management company called Sterling Holdings. The building was being sold. All tenants had 30 days to vacate. Diane read the letter at the kitchen table, her reading glasses perched on her nose, her face carefully blank. She folded the letter, set it aside, and said, "Well, I suppose we will figure something out." But Claire could see the fear beneath the composure. Diane was 61, living on a nurse's pension and Social Security. Her options were limited. And now, because of the chaos that Grant had brought into their lives, she was about to lose her home too. That night, at 2 in the morning, Claire sat on the bathroom floor. The tile was cold against her legs. The apartment was silent except for the ticking of the clock on the living room wall and the distant sound of a train passing through the city. She looked at her phone. No missed calls, no new messages. The screen glowed with a loneliness so complete it felt almost physical, like being submerged in cold water. She whispered into the empty room, "I have nothing. I am nothing." And then she sat there in the silence and let the words settle around her like dust, and she wondered if this was what it felt like to disappear completely. There is a quote, and no one is quite sure who said it first, but it goes like this: "Rock bottom became the solid foundation on which I rebuilt my life." It sounds like the kind of thing people say on motivational posters, usually printed over a photograph of a mountain or an eagle or something equally dramatic. But like most things that have been repeated so many times, they start to feel like cliches. It is true. When you lose everything, you also lose the fear of losing, and that strange, unexpected freedom can change a person. Claire found the sketchbooks on a Saturday morning, 3 weeks after the eviction notice, 2 weeks after the car died, 1 week after she saw the engagement photos that felt like a knife between her ribs. She was cleaning out a closet in her old bedroom, trying to organize the chaos of a life compressed into a tiny space when a box fell from the top shelf and landed at her feet. Inside were sketchbooks, dozens of them, dating back to high school, filled with drawings she had forgotten she had made. She sat on the floor and opened them. Page after page of life captured in pencil and charcoal and ink. A portrait of Diane, sleeping in her armchair, a street scene from a trip to Savannah, a series of hands, Diane's hands, her father's hands from memory, her own hands holding a paintbrush. And then she found the most recent one, from just before she married Grant. The drawings were different here, bolder, more alive. A woman standing at the edge of a cliff, not falling, but leaning into the wind, a pair of eyes, enormous and fierce, staring out from the page with an intensity that made Claire's breath catch. She had been good. She had been really good. She remembered now. She remembered how it felt to hold a pencil and watch something emerge from nothing, to translate the raw, messy, complicated experience of being alive into lines and shadows and light. She remembered the scholarship she had been offered to the School of Visual Arts in New York. She remembered turning it down because Grant's business was struggling, and he needed her in Charlotte. She had given up New York, She had given up her art career. She had given up herself for a man who had thrown her away like a shirt that no longer fit. Claire picked up a charcoal pencil from the box of old supplies. She opened a fresh page in one of the sketchbooks, and she began to draw. She drew for 6 hours straight. She drew women, women in pain, women rising, women with cracked skin and shining eyes, women whose bodies told stories of loss and survival and stubborn, defiant hope. She drew until her fingers were black with charcoal, and the light outside had shifted from morning gold to afternoon amber. When she was done, she had 12 pieces, raw, fierce, emotional pieces that looked nothing like the careful, pretty watercolors she had made as a younger woman. These were something else entirely. These were war cries. On impulse, she took a photo of one, a portrait of a woman walking through a field of ashes with her chin lifted and her eyes blazing, and posted it on Instagram. She had not used the account in years. She had fewer than 200 followers. She typed a simple caption: "She lost everything except herself." She put the phone down and went to help Diane with dinner. The next morning, she checked her phone and stopped breathing. 47,000 likes, 2,300 comments. The image had been shared over 6,000 times. By the end of the week, the post had reached 200,000 likes. It had been featured on art blogs, shared by lifestyle influencers, picked up by a regional magazine. Claire's inbox was flooded with messages from women who said the image had made them cry, had made them feel seen, had given them permission to believe they could survive whatever they were going through. One message was different from the rest. It came from a man named Jack Whitfield. "My name is Jack Whitfield. I own the Whitfield Gallery in Asheville. I have been in this business for 15 years, and I have never seen anything quite like your work. If you are open to a conversation, I would love to discuss the possibility of a solo exhibition. No strings attached. Claire stared at the message for a long time. She read it 3 times to make sure she was not imagining things. She showed it to Megan, who immediately searched Jack Whitfield online. He is legitimate, Megan reported. Whitfield Gallery, downtown Asheville, well-respected, strong reputation. He specializes in emerging artists. He is also, she added, glancing at Claire, apparently a widower. Lost his wife to cancer 3 years ago. Megan, this is not about that. I know, I am just saying. Claire drove to Asheville the following Tuesday, borrowing Megan's car since hers was still sitting dead at the mechanic's shop. The Whitfield Gallery was in a converted warehouse on a tree-lined street near the River Arts District. It was beautiful in a way that truly good spaces are beautiful. Not flashy, not trying too hard, just warm and right. Jack Whitfield was waiting at the entrance. He was 40 years old, tall, but not imposing, with sandy brown hair that needed a trim and kind, tired eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a flannel shirt and paint-stained boots, and he shook Claire's hand with a grip that was firm but gentle. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I meant what I said in my message. Your work stopped me cold." They walked through the gallery, and Jack showed her the space he had in mind for her exhibition, a large room with high ceilings and natural light that poured in from skylights above. "I want to give you a solo show," Jack said. "Full exhibition. Your work, your vision, your story. I will handle the logistics, the promotion, the framing, everything. You just need to create." "Why?" Claire asked. "You do not know me. You have seen one image. Because that one image told me everything I needed to know. You are not making art for attention or money or validation. You are making art because you have to. Because something inside you needs to get out. And that is the only kind of art worth showing." Claire felt tears prick her eyes, but she held them back. She had been holding them back for weeks, and she was getting very good at it. "Your art does not need my help," Jack said quietly. "It just needs a wall." She said yes. Over the next 3 months, Claire worked with a fury she had never known. She painted in Diane's apartment, converting the small living room into a makeshift studio, covering the floors with drop cloths, and filling the air with the sharp smell of turpentine and oil paint. Diane did not complain. She simply rearranged her life around Claire's canvases and brought her sandwiches at midnight and told her when the light was good. Claire painted women, dozens of them, women breaking chains, women standing in storms, women rebuilding houses with their bare hands. And the centerpiece, a massive canvas, 5 feet by 7 feet, that showed a woman walking through a wall of fire. The woman's clothes were burning, her hair was wild, but her eyes were calm, clear, and absolutely undefeated. Claire called it Through the Fire. The exhibition opened on a Friday evening in October. Claire titled it simply, Unbroken. The opening night of Unbroken at the Whitfield Gallery was the kind of event that Asheville loved. Raw, real, packed with emotion and free wine, and the electric buzz of something genuinely special happening. 200 people came. They stood in front of Claire's paintings and went quiet, the kind of quiet that is the highest compliment art can receive. A few women cried openly. One older woman stood in front of Through the Fire for 20 minutes without moving, and when Claire finally approached her, the woman grabbed her hand and said, "You painted my life. I do not know how you did it, but you painted my life." The reviews came fast, and they came strong. The Asheville Citizen-Times called the exhibition a triumph of raw emotional power. A Raleigh art blog wrote that Claire Bennett was the voice of every woman who has been told she is not enough. And then Margaret Caldwell arrived. Margaret was 58 years old, a New York art collector with silver hair and a reputation for having one of the most discerning eyes in the American art world. She had flown down from Manhattan specifically because she had seen Claire's Instagram post 4 months earlier and had been following her work ever since. Margaret stood in front of Through the Fire for a long time. Then she turned to Claire and said, "Name your price." Claire had not thought about prices. She had not thought about anything beyond the act of creation itself. She looked at Jack, who was standing nearby, and he gave her a small nod that said, "Trust yourself." $85,000, Claire said, and she had no idea where the number came from, only that it felt right. Margaret did not blink. Done. She purchased Through the Fire that evening, along with 3 smaller pieces, for a combined total of $140,000. She shook Claire's hand and said, "This is not art. This is a war cry, and the world needs to hear it." The months that followed were a blur of momentum. Claire's work sold faster than she could create it. She was featured in Southern Living magazine in a spread titled "The Woman Who Turned Heartbreak into Art." She was invited to speak at women's conferences and art festivals. She was commissioned to create pieces for corporate offices and private collection. She used the money wisely. She paid off Diane's debts. She found a small but lovely cottage in the Dilworth neighborhood, a white house with a blue front door, and a wraparound porch that Diane immediately filled with potted ferns and rocking chairs. She bought a reliable used car, a blue Subaru that started every time she turned the key. She was independent. She was successful. She was, for the first time in years, free, and Jack Whitfield was part of that freedom. Not in a romantic way, not yet. He was simply present, steady, and quiet, and reliable, like a lighthouse that does not demand attention, but is always there when you need to find your way. He helped her hang shows and negotiate with collectors. He introduced her to other artists and gallerists. He never pushed, never overstepped, never made her feel like she owed him anything. One afternoon, while they were hanging a new series of paintings, Claire dropped a canvas on her foot and yelped. Jack caught it before it hit the ground and said, "The art world is cutthroat, but I did not think it was literal." She laughed, a real laugh, full and easy, the kind of laugh that comes from a place of genuine safety. Grant saw the Southern Living article. Claire knew because Megan told her. He had been seen at a newsstand downtown, holding the magazine, staring at the cover where Claire stood in her studio. Paint on her hands, a smile on her face that did not need his permission. And Victoria, apparently, was furious. She called the magazine and tried to get them to retract the story, Megan reported, with undisguised glee. She claimed Claire was misrepresenting her life. The editor told her to pound sand. Claire allowed herself a small moment of satisfaction. Just a small one. She thought, "I won. It is over. He took everything, and I built something better from the wreckage." She was wrong again. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. It was from the law offices of Kessler, Marsh, and Boone, one of the most expensive litigation firms in the Southeast. It was addressed to Claire, and it alleged the following: that Claire's artwork, specifically the pieces created during and after her marriage, were derived from concepts, ideas, and emotional experiences that were products of the marital partnership. That Grant Bennett, as her former spouse, was entitled to 50% of all revenue generated from said artwork under the doctrine of marital intellectual property. In plain English, Grant was suing her for half of everything she had earned from her art. Claire read the letter 3 times, each time hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something less absurd. They did not. Megan read it, and her face went red. He is claiming that your paintings were inspired by the lifestyle he provided, that without the marriage, you would never have created this work. He is literally trying to take credit for your pain. Can he do that? The legal theory is weak, but the judge he is filing under is known for being sympathetic to complex property claims. And Grant's legal team is expensive and aggressive. They can drag this out for years. The court issued a temporary freeze on Claire's art sale earnings, pending a full review of the claim. Just like that, the money stopped. The freedom she had built, the cottage, the car, the studio, all of it suddenly balanced on a legal razor's edge. Here is something worth remembering, and this is not just advice for divorce situations. It is advice for life. If you are ever going through a divorce, document everything. Screenshots, bank statements, property records, creative processes. The person who has the evidence has the power. But more than that, protect your work. Protect your intellectual property. Your gifts belong to you. They were yours before any relationship, and they will be yours after. No one gets to claim your talent as their asset. The freeze on Claire's art income hit like a winter storm that arrives without warning. One day she was financially stable, and the next she was staring at a bank balance that was shrinking with every mortgage payment and grocery run. She could not sell new work without the proceeds being held in escrow. She could not access the earnings from previous sales. She was once again trapped in a financial cage that Grant had constructed with expensive lawyers and bad faith arguments. But the money was only part of it. Victoria launched what could only be described as a coordinated assault on Claire's reputation. Suddenly, social media accounts that had never existed before began posting about Claire. Anonymous accounts with names like Art Truth, Seeker, and Charlotte Real Talk published long threads claiming that Claire's art was trauma exploitation, that she was manipulating public sympathy for profit, that her story of betrayal was exaggerated for attention. The posts were sophisticated and relentless. They quoted details from Claire's life that only someone with inside information would know: the timing of her divorce filing, the amount of her art sales, the name of her exhibition. They tagged art blogs, gallery accounts, and journalists, flooding the conversation with doubt and suspicion. 2 galleries that had been planning to feature Claire's work quietly pulled their offers. A women's magazine that had scheduled an interview canceled without explanation. The momentum that had carried Claire forward for months began to slow, then stall. Like a plane losing altitude. Jack stood by her. He kept her work on his gallery walls. He responded to every negative review with a calm, factual rebuttal. He refused to buckle under the pressure, even when Grant's business connections began threatening to pull their own art purchases from the Whitfield Gallery. "You are going to lose clients over this," Claire told him one evening, sitting in his gallery after hours, surrounded by her paintings in the golden light of the track lamps. "Maybe," Jack said, "but I got into this business to show great art, not to play politics. And your art is great, Claire. That has not changed." She looked at him, this quiet man who had lost his own wife and rebuilt his own life, and somehow found the courage to keep believing that beautiful things were worth fighting for. "You do not have to do this for me," she said. "I know. That is why I am doing it." And then the worst thing happened. Not the worst legal thing or the worst financial thing, the worst real thing. On a Wednesday morning in November, Claire's phone rang at 6:15. It was the hospital. Diane had collapsed. She had been getting ready for her morning walk, the one she took every day around the neighborhood, rain or shine, and she had fallen in the hallway. A neighbor found her and called the ambulance. By the time Claire reached the hospital, Diane was in the cardiac care unit, hooked up to monitors that beeped with a rhythm that was both reassuring and terrifying. The doctor, a young woman with kind eyes and a direct manner, explained that Diane had suffered a mild heart attack. The damage is not severe, the doctor said, but her blood pressure has been dangerously high for some time. Stress is a significant contributing factor. Stress. The word hung in the air like an accusation. Claire knew exactly what had caused her mother's stress. Not age, not genetics, not diet. It was the past 6 months. It was watching her daughter be destroyed by a man Diane had never trusted. It was the eviction, the financial strain, the betrayal by Rebecca, the constant anxiety of wondering what would happen next. Claire sat by Diane's bed, holding her mother's hand, the hand that had held Claire through every scraped knee and broken heart and lonely night of her childhood, the hand that had worked 30 years of night shifts to keep a roof over their heads, the hand that had stirred pots and folded laundry and wiped tears and never, ever let go. "Mom," Claire whispered, "I am so sorry. This is all my fault." Diane opened her eyes. Even from a hospital bed, even with tubes in her arm and monitors blinking beside her, Diane Porter was formidable. She looked at her daughter with an expression that combined ferocity and love in equal measure. "You listen to me, Claire Ann Bennett," Diane said, and her voice was hoarse but steady. "You did not start this war, but by God, you're going to finish it." Claire nodded. She could not speak, but something shifted inside her in that hospital room. Something hardened, not in a bitter way, not in a way that made her cold or cruel, but in the way that steel hardens when it is forged in fire. She became resolved. She became certain. She was done being the woman things happened to. She was going to become the woman who happened to things. When someone tries to take credit for your work, your talent, your resilience, that tells you everything about their character and nothing about yours. Protect your creative process. Protect your intellectual property. But most importantly, protect the people you love. Because at the end of the day, the art, the money, the houses, none of it matters as much as the hand you are holding when the lights go dim. Megan Holloway had not slept properly in weeks. She had been working Claire's case during the day and spending her nights digging through financial records, court filings, and corporate documents with the obsessive focus of a woman who takes injustice personally. And Megan took injustice very personally. It was on a Sunday evening, sitting at her dining room table with a cold cup of coffee and her third legal pad of notes, that Megan found the thread that would unravel everything. She had been reviewing the corporate filings for Bennett Property Group when she noticed something unusual. Several of the properties Grant had purchased over the past 5 years had been acquired at prices significantly below market value, sometimes 40 or 50% below. The sellers were all different, but the banks that had financed the purchases were connected to a single commercial lending network. Megan dug deeper. She pulled public records, cross-referenced banking officials, and made 3 very discreet phone calls to colleagues in financial law. By Monday morning, she had the full picture, and it was far worse than anyone had imagined. Grant Bennett had not built his real estate empire through talent, hard work, or business acumen. He had built it through systematic fraud. The scheme worked like this. Grant and an associate, someone with deep banking connections, would identify properties. They would arrange for fraudulent appraisals that drastically understated the property's values. Then, using forged income documents and falsified financial statements, they would secure loans at these deflated prices, purchase the properties, and immediately resell them at true market value, pocketing the difference. It was a variation of a classic real estate fraud, and it had been operating for at least 5 years. The total amount of money involved was estimated at over $12 million. And the associate with the banking connections? Gerald Ashford, Victoria's father. Victoria was not just Grant's fiancée. She was his business partner. Their relationship had not started as a romance. It had started as a financial arrangement. Victoria's family connections gave Grant access to corrupt banking officials and compliant appraisers. In return, Victoria received a percentage of every deal. The romance, if you could call it that, came later, a convenient side effect of a criminal partnership. But the most stunning discovery was still to come. Megan received an anonymous package at her office on a Thursday afternoon. Inside was a flash drive and a handwritten note on plain white paper. The note said, "I know sorry is not enough, but maybe this is." The flash drive contained audio recordings, dozens of them. Conversations between Grant and Victoria discussing their fraudulent deals, their plans to hide assets from Claire, their strategy for the intellectual property lawsuit. In one recording, Grant laughed and said, "She has no idea. She thinks I am a real estate genius. She does not know the whole thing is built on paper." In another, Victoria said, "If she keeps making noise, we destroy her reputation completely. I have enough contacts in media to make her radioactive." The recordings were devastating, and they had been made by Victoria herself. It took Megan less than 24 hours to figure out who had sent the package. The handwriting on the note matched samples Megan had from legal documents. The sender was Rebecca Porter. Rebecca, the cousin who had betrayed Claire, had been working inside Victoria's operation for months. She had seen everything. And somewhere along the way, guilt, conscience, or simple human decency had caught up with her. She had copied Victoria's insurance recordings, the ones Victoria kept as leverage against Grant in case he ever tried to cut her out, and she had sent them to the one person she knew would use them. Megan called Claire immediately. "I need you to come to my office right now. Bring your mother if she is well enough." Claire came alone. Diane was still recovering at home, under strict orders from her doctor to avoid stress, which was a laughable prescription given the circumstances. Megan laid out everything on her conference table: the financial records, the fraudulent appraisals, the forged documents, the recordings, the connection to Gerald Ashford, the whole rotten architecture of Grant Bennett's empire. Claire listened in silence. She had expected betrayal, she had expected greed, but the scope of it, the calculated, systematic dishonesty of a man she had loved for nearly a decade, still had the power to shock her. And then Megan showed her one last piece of evidence. The $14,000 Tiffany necklace, the one that had started everything, had been purchased from an account that Megan had traced back to a trust fund. Claire's trust fund. Money left to Claire by her father, David Porter, who had set aside a modest sum before his death to ensure his daughter would always have a safety net. Grant had quietly transferred the funds into his own accounts years ago during the early days of their marriage, when Claire had trusted him completely and had not questioned a single financial document he put in front of her. He had bought his mistress a necklace with money from Claire's dead father. Claire sat in Megan's office for a long time after hearing this. She did not cry. She did not scream. She sat very still, and her face took on an expression that Megan had never seen before: calm, focused, and absolutely resolute. "What do we do?" Claire asked. "We take this to the FBI. Financial fraud of this magnitude is a federal crime, and with these recordings, we do not just have a civil case, we have a criminal one. Then let us do it. Claire personally delivered the evidence to the Charlotte field office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. She sat in a gray room with gray furniture and told two federal agents everything she knew. She signed statements. She provided documents. She answered every question with the quiet precision of a woman who had nothing left to lose and everything left to fight for. The investigation moved faster than anyone expected. The arrest of Grant Bennett was, by any standard, spectacular. It happened at the Charlotte City Club on a Saturday evening in December, at what was supposed to be the social event of the season, the engagement party of Grant Bennett and Victoria Ashford. 200 guests, ice sculptures, a 12-piece jazz band, champagne that cost more per bottle than Claire had in her bank account the day she was thrown out of her own home. Grant was standing at the center of the ballroom, one arm around Victoria, the other holding a champagne flute, delivering a toast about love and new beginnings and the importance of surrounding yourself with the right people. The irony, as they say, was thick enough to spread on toast. The doors opened at 8:47. 6 FBI agents in dark suits walked in with the kind of quiet authority that immediately silences a room. The jazz band stopped mid-note. 200 champagne flutes froze in midair. The lead agent, a woman named Special Agent Diane Torres, walked directly to Grant. She did not hurry. She did not need to. "Grant Allen Bennett," she said, and her voice carried across the silent ballroom like a church bell. "You are under arrest for wire fraud, bank fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes against the United States. You have the right to remain silent." Grant's face went through every color in the palette. White, then red, then a gray-green that Claire would later think of as the color of a man watching his entire fabricated life collapse in real time. Victoria tried to run. She made it approximately 15 feet before a second agent intercepted her. She was arrested on the same charges, plus additional counts related to her role in orchestrating the fraudulent appraisal network. Gerald Ashford, Victoria's father, was arrested at his home in Atlanta the same evening. The guests stood in stunned silence as Grant and Victoria were led out of the ballroom in handcuffs. Someone dropped a champagne glass. It shattered on the marble floor, and the sound echoed through the room like an exclamation point. The legal aftermath was swift and thorough. Grant's assets were seized by the federal government. Every property, every account, every hidden dollar was cataloged and frozen. The forensic accountants found even more than Megan had estimated, nearly $15 million in fraudulently obtained assets scattered across domestic accounts, offshore holdings, and shell companies. The divorce was finalized within weeks, with Grant facing federal charges and his assets under government control. His legal team's appetite for fighting Claire's claims evaporated completely. Claire received full restitution of her trust fund, her share of legitimate marital assets, and significant damages. The intellectual property lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice. The judge issued a written opinion that included the sentence, "The respondents claim that the petitioner's artistic talent is a marital asset, is not only legally unfounded, but morally repugnant." The fabricated psychiatric letter that had cost Claire her teaching job was investigated and found to be entirely fraudulent. Dr. William Reinhardt lost his medical license. The school board issued a formal apology and offered Claire her position back with full back pay. Claire declined the position, not because she did not love teaching, she did, deeply, but because she had found something else, something that needed her in a different way. Grant was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Victoria received 8 years. Gerald Ashford received 6. On the day of Grant's sentencing, Claire did not go to the courthouse. She stayed home, in her cottage, with the blue front door, and she painted. She painted a woman standing in a sunlit garden, her face turned toward the sky, her hands open at her sides. The woman was not angry. She was not triumphant. She was simply at peace. Claire called that painting After. Rebecca came back into their lives slowly and carefully, like someone approaching a door they are not sure they are welcome to enter. She had testified against Grant and Victoria in exchange for immunity, providing critical testimony about the inner workings of their fraud operation. She came to Diane's cottage one afternoon with a bouquet of sunflowers, Diane's favorite. She stood on the porch with the flowers in her hands and tears on her face. Diane opened the door. She looked at Rebecca for a long moment. Then she said, "You have got a long way to go, girl, but at least you are walking in the right direction." She took the flowers and went inside to find a vase. Rebecca stood on the porch and cried, and Claire, watching from the kitchen window, felt something she had not expected to feel. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the possibility of forgiveness. And sometimes that is enough to start. 6 months after the trial, Claire stood in front of a building on Moorhead Street in Charlotte. It was a former warehouse that had been vacant for years, its windows dusty, its brick walls faded by decades of Carolina sun. But Claire did not see what it was. She saw what it would become. She had purchased the building with the proceeds from her art sales and the settlement from the divorce. It had taken months of renovation, months of planning, months of working with architects and contractors and community organizers to turn a derelict warehouse into something alive. The sign above the entrance read, "The Porter House, Art Studio and Community Center," named after her mother, named after the woman who had held everything together with love and chicken pot pie and the unshakable belief that her daughter was stronger than any storm. The Porter House was not just a gallery. It was a place where women rebuilding their lives could come to learn, to create, to breathe. Claire offered free art classes 3 days a week. Megan ran a pro bono legal clinic on Tuesday evenings, helping women navigate divorce and financial abuse. A local therapist volunteered on Saturdays. The walls were covered with art made by the women who came through the door, each piece a testament to survival. The opening day was in April, exactly 1 year after Claire had found the receipt in Grant's coat pocket. She had not planned the timing. It simply happened that way. As if the universe had a sense of narrative structure, Diane cut the ribbon. She stood at the entrance in her best dress, a pair of scissors in her hand, and looked out at the crowd that had gathered, neighbors, artists, journalists, women who had heard about the Porter House and driven hours to be there. "My daughter lost everything," Diane said, her voice clear and strong, carrying across the crowd with the authority of a woman who had survived 61 years of life and was not about to whisper now. And then she built something better than everything. The crowd applauded. Claire stood beside her mother and tried very hard not to cry, and failed, and did not care. The first months of the Porter House were busy and chaotic, and exactly what Claire had needed. Women came from across the state. Some were in the middle of divorces. Some had left abusive relationships. Some were simply lost, searching for a place where they could rediscover who they were underneath the roles they had been playing. Claire taught them to draw, to paint, to look at a blank canvas, not with fear, but with possibility. She told them what Jack had once told her. "Your art does not need anyone's permission. It just needs a wall." And she told them her story. Not all of it, not every painful detail, but enough. Enough to let them know that the woman standing in front of them, with paint on her hands and chalk in her hair, had once sat on a bathroom floor at 2 in the morning and whispered, "I am nothing." Enough to let them know that the distance between that floor and this room was not talent or luck or some magical transformation. It was simply the decision to get up, to try again, to believe, against all evidence, that you are worth more than the worst thing that has happened to you. Jack was there, of course. He had been there through all of it, the legal battles, the exhibitions, the hospital visits, the renovation. He had carried boxes and hung paintings and fixed a leaking pipe in the porterhouse basement on the day before the opening. Their relationship had grown slowly, like a garden planted by patient hands. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic declarations, no sweeping romantic moments stolen from the movies. There was just time, shared meals, long walks, quiet evenings on the porch of Claire's cottage, watching the sky turn pink above the Charlotte skyline. One evening, about a month after the porterhouse opened, they sat together on that porch. The air smelled like jasmine and freshly cut grass. Diane was inside, watching a cooking show and occasionally shouting corrections at the television. Jack was quiet for a while, the kind of quiet that is not empty, but full, like a room full of light. "You know," he said finally, "you do not need saving, Claire." She looked at him. "But I would like to be around while you save yourself." Claire smiled. Not the polite smile she had worn for 8 years of marriage, the one that covered uncertainty and doubt. This was a different smile. This one came from a place so deep inside her that she had forgotten it existed. "I think I would like that too," she said. They sat there as the sun went down, two people who understood loss, two people who had rebuilt their lives from wreckage, two people who knew that love is not a rescue operation, but a partnership between equals who choose each other every day. Diane appeared at the screen door. "Are you two going to sit out there all night, or are you coming in for pie? I did not spend 2 hours on this crust for the squirrels." They laughed and went inside. Claire continued to paint. Her work evolved, moving from the raw fury of her early pieces to something more nuanced, more layered, more hopeful. She painted women in gardens, women building houses, women laughing, women holding each other up. She painted a series called Rising that was exhibited in New York, Atlanta, and Chicago, and that was reviewed by the New York Times as a masterclass in emotional resilience expressed through color and form. Margaret Caldwell, the collector who had bought Through the Fire, became a patron and friend. She established a scholarship in Claire's name at the School of Visual Arts, the same school that had once offered Claire a spot she had turned down. Now other young women would have the chance Claire had given away. Megan continued to be Megan, fierce, loyal, and slightly terrifying in a courtroom. She eventually became a partner at her firm and dedicated a significant portion of her practice to representing women in financial abuse cases. She credited Claire with showing her that the law was not just about winning arguments, but about protecting people. Diane fully recovered from her heart attack. She became the unofficial grandmother of the Porter house, greeting every woman who walked through the door with a warm hello and an offer of something homemade. She started a small cooking class on Thursday mornings called Feeding the Soul, and it became one of the most popular programs the center offered. Rebecca slowly earned her way back. She volunteered at the Porter house on weekends, quietly and without fanfare, doing whatever needed to be done. She and Claire were not yet what they had once been. Maybe they never would be, but they were something careful and honest and growing. And Grant was in a federal prison in South Carolina, wearing the same khaki uniform as every other inmate, sleeping in a bunk that was not king-sized, eating meals that were not prepared by private chefs. Claire did not think about him often. When she did, she felt not anger, but something closer to pity. He had everything: a wife who loved him, a home full of warmth, a life that could have been genuinely good, and he had thrown it all away for a scheme and a woman who had been using him as thoroughly as he had been using everyone else. He had thrown away the wife, and the wife had built a world. On the 1-year anniversary of the Porterhouse, Claire stood in the main gallery, surrounded by the art of the women she had taught. The walls were alive with color, bold strokes and soft washes, and fierce, joyful, complicated images made by women who had walked in broken and were walking out whole. She looked around the room and felt something she had not felt in a long time. Not happiness exactly, though that was part of it. Not pride, though that was there too. It was something bigger, something that included all of those feelings, but transcended them. It was peace. She thought about the woman she had been a year ago. The woman who ironed shirts and burned casseroles and told herself lies because the truth was too frightening to face. She did not judge that woman. She loved that woman. That woman had done her best with what she knew, and when she finally learned the truth, she had found the courage to survive it. Claire Bennett did not get a fairy tale. She got something better. She got a life she built with her own hands, on her own terms. From the ashes of someone else's cruelty, she learned that the most dangerous lie is not the one someone tells you. It is the one you tell yourself, that you are not strong enough to survive. You are. You always were. And if this story reminded you of your own battle, whether you are in it right now or you have already come through the other side, remember this. Your pain is not your identity. It is your fuel. Keep going. And if you need to hear it today, I am proud of you. The sun was setting over Charlotte, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Claire locked the doors of the Porterhouse, walked to her blue Subaru, and drove home to her cottage with the blue front door, where her mother was making dinner and the porch light was on. She was not the wife he threw away. She was the woman who rose. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with real-life lessons. Every word was crafted with purpose, to entertain, to inspire, and to remind you that no matter what chapter you are in, your story is not over. Thank you for listening. We will see you in the next one.